The old city bus came to a slow stop at the corner of Fifth Avenue and Market Street. The doors opened with a loud hiss and Elena Martinez stepped down carefully onto the sidewalk. She held the metal rail tightly as she descended the steps. Her knees hurt a little. They always did after a long morning of work. Elena was 58 years old. Her hair was mostly gray now, pulled back in a simple bun at the back of her head. She wore a dark blue coat that she had owned for many years. The coat was clean, but anyone could see it was old. The edges were worn, and one of the buttons had been replaced with a different one that did not quite match. Under the coat, she wore a simple dress. It was her best dress, but it was not fancy. Her black shoes were polished, but the leather was cracked in places from years of use. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment and looked up at the tall buildings around her. This part of the city was different from her neighborhood. Everything here looked expensive and new. The shop windows displayed things she could never afford. Well-dressed people walked past her quickly, talking on their phones or hurrying to important meetings. Elena reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a gift certificate for Laurent's restaurant. Her hands trembled slightly as she held it. This piece of paper was precious to her. It meant more than just a meal at a fancy restaurant. Her husband, Roberto, had bought this gift certificate 3 years ago. He had been sick then, very sick, but he had used his savings to buy it for her. He had given it to her on their 35th wedding anniversary. "For the queen you have always been," he had written on a note attached to it. "One day you will go to this fancy place and remember how much I love you." Roberto had died 6 months later. Elena had kept the gift certificate in her drawer all this time. She could not bring herself to use it. It felt too painful, too final. But today was different. Today would have been their 38th anniversary. She had woken up that morning and decided it was time. She would honor Roberto's memory by finally using his gift. Elena had called the restaurant 2 weeks ago to make a reservation. The woman on the phone had been polite and professional. She had taken Elena's name and phone number and confirmed that yes, they accepted the gift certificate. Elena had marked the date on her calendar and counted down the days. This morning she had finished her cleaning job at the office building on 3rd Street. She worked there 3 days a week, scrubbing floors and cleaning bathrooms. It was hard work, but it paid her bills. After work, she had gone home to her small apartment. She had showered and put on her best dress. She had looked at herself in the mirror for a long time, thinking about Roberto and all the years they had spent together. Now she stood in front of Laurent's. The restaurant was on the ground floor of a tall glass building. Through the large windows, she could see white tablecloths and sparkling glasses. Everything inside looked beautiful and elegant. People in expensive clothes sat at the tables eating and talking. Elena took a deep breath and walked toward the front door. A young man in a uniform opened the door for her. "Good afternoon," he said with a smile. Elena smiled back and thanked him. Inside, the restaurant was even more beautiful than it looked from outside. Soft music played in the background. The air smelled like fresh flowers and expensive perfume. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. The walls were decorated with paintings in gold frames. A tall wooden podium stood near the entrance. Behind it stood a man in a black suit. He was the maitre d', the person who seated guests at their tables. He was looking down at a large book on the podium. When Elena approached, he looked up. Elena saw his expression change. For just a moment, when he first looked up, he had a professional smile on his face. But when he saw her, really saw her, the smile faded. His eyes moved quickly from her old coat to her worn shoes, then back to her face. The look in his eyes made Elena's stomach feel tight. "May I help you?" he asked. His voice was cold and formal. It was not the friendly voice he would use for other guests. "Yes, please," Elena said politely. "I have a reservation. My name is Elena Martinez. The reservation is for 1 o'clock. The maitre d' did not look at his book. He did not check his computer screen. He just looked at her and shook his head slightly. "I'm very sorry, but we are completely booked today," he said. "We have no available tables." Elena felt confused. "But I made a reservation 2 weeks ago," she said. "I called and spoke to someone. They confirmed everything." "I'm afraid there must be some mistake," the maitre d' said. He was already looking past her toward the door as if waiting for her to leave. Elena opened her purse and pulled out the small envelope. Inside was the gift certificate and a piece of paper where she had written down her confirmation number. "I have the confirmation number here," she said. "And I have a gift certificate." The maitre d' barely glanced at what she held in her hand. As I said, we are fully booked. Perhaps you could try calling again another day. His tone suggested that he wanted this conversation to end. Elena felt a familiar hurt in her chest. It was not the first time someone had treated her this way because of how she looked. She had cleaned offices and houses for rich people for many years. She knew that some people looked at her uniform and her work-worn hands and decided she was not important. But this was different. This was a place her beloved husband had wanted her to experience. This was supposed to be special. Could you please check your reservation system? Elena asked. She kept her voice calm and polite even though she felt upset. My confirmation number is... Madam, the maitre d' interrupted her. His voice was sharper now. I have already told you that we have no tables available. Now if you will excuse me, I have other guests to attend to. At that moment, the door opened behind Elena. A young couple walked in. The woman wore a designer dress and carried an expensive handbag. The man wore a suit that probably cost more than Elena's monthly rent. They both had the confident look of people who were used to being welcomed everywhere they went. The maitre d's entire face changed. The cold expression disappeared, replaced by a warm, genuine smile. Good afternoon, he said happily. Welcome to Laurent's. Do you have a reservation? Yes, under Richardson, the man said casually. Of course, Mr. Richardson. Let me check. The maitre d' looked at his computer screen, typing quickly. Ah yes, here we are. Party of 2. We have a lovely table ready for you by the window. Elena watched as he picked up 2 leather-bound menus and came out from behind his podium. He walked right past her as if she were invisible, leading the couple toward the dining room. Through the doorway, Elena could see him seating them at a beautiful table next to a large window with a view of the city. She stood there, still holding her envelope. Other people entered the restaurant. The maitre d' returned to his podium and greeted each one warmly. Some had reservations, some did not, but all of them were well dressed. All of them looked like they belonged there, and all of them were seated quickly and courteously. Elena did not move. She was not the type of person to make a scene or cause trouble, but something inside her would not let her just walk away. Roberto had wanted this for her. He had saved money while he was sick to buy this gift. She deserved to be here just as much as anyone else. A waiter who looked older than the others walked past. He was carrying a tray of empty glasses. He glanced at Elena standing near the entrance and noticed the confused, hurt look on her face. Something made him pause. He had worked in restaurants for over 30 years. He had seen many things, and he recognized what was happening here. The older waiter set down his tray on a nearby service station. His name was Thomas, and he had worked at Laurent's for 32 years. He had started as a busboy when he was just 20 years old. Over the decades, he had seen the restaurant change owners 3 times. He had served celebrities, politicians, and business leaders. He had also seen how some people treated others, and it always bothered him. Thomas walked over to where Elena stood. She was still near the entrance, clutching her envelope. She looked uncertain, as if she was trying to decide whether to leave or try again. Excuse me, ma'am, Thomas said gently. Can I help you with something? Elena looked at him. His eyes were kind. There was no judgment in his face, only genuine concern. She felt a small bit of relief. I made a reservation, she explained, for 1 o'clock. But the gentleman at the desk said there are no tables available. Thomas frowned slightly. May I see your confirmation? He asked politely. Elena handed him the paper from her envelope. Thomas read it carefully. He saw her name, the date, the time, and the confirmation number. Everything looked correct and official. Would you excuse me for just 1 moment? Thomas said. He walked to the maitre d's podium. Elena watched as the 2 men talked. The maitre d' looked annoyed. He gestured dismissively with his hand as if brushing away Thomas's concerns. But Thomas did not back down. He pointed at the computer screen and seemed to be asking questions. The maitre d' said something sharp. His face was red now. Thomas returned to Elena. May I see your gift certificate as well? He asked. Elena took it out of the envelope and handed it to him. Thomas examined it. It was real, not expired, and valid for a full dinner for 1 person at Laurent's. Ma'am, please wait here for just a few more minutes, Thomas said. I need to make a phone call. Thomas walked quickly toward the back of the restaurant. He pulled out his cell phone and dialed a number he had saved for emergencies. It was a direct line to the office of Victoria Chen, the CEO of Chen Hospitality Group. The company owned Laurent's and 20 other restaurants and hotels across the country. Thomas had met Victoria several times over the years. She was known for being tough but fair. She expected excellence from her employees, but she also believed strongly in treating every customer with respect. Thomas had her number because she had personally told all senior staff members to call her if they ever witnessed discrimination or unethical behavior at any of her properties. The phone rang 3 times before someone answered Ms. Chen's office. A woman's voice said, "This is Thomas Webb, senior waiter at Laurent's downtown location." Thomas said, "I need to speak with Ms. Chen. It's urgent." "Ms. Chen is in a meeting," the assistant said. "Can I take a message?" "Please tell her this concerns a customer being refused service at one of her restaurants despite having a valid reservation and gift certificate," Thomas said firmly. She would want to know about this immediately. There was a pause. Then the assistant said, "Hold, please." Less than a minute later, Victoria Chen's voice came on the line. "Thomas, what's happened?" Thomas explained the situation quickly but thoroughly. He described Elena, her reservation, the gift certificate, and how the maitre d' had refused to seat her while seating other guests without reservations. He also mentioned that he had checked the computer system and found something disturbing. "The reservation was in the system until 20 minutes ago," Thomas said quietly. "It was deleted right around the time this guest would have been arriving. The system log shows who deleted it." Victoria was silent for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. "I'm 10 minutes away. I was already in the area for inspections. Do not let that customer leave. Make sure she is comfortable. And Thomas, thank you for calling me." Thomas returned to Elena. She was still standing near the entrance. She looked tired and sad. Several other customers had walked past her, giving her curious looks. She clearly did not fit in with the usual clientele, and she knew it. "Ma'am," Thomas said kindly, "I've spoken to the restaurant's owner. She is on her way here right now and would like to speak with you personally. Would you mind waiting for just a few more minutes?" Elena looked surprised. "The owner? I don't want to cause any trouble. Maybe I should just go." "Please don't," Thomas said. "You have done nothing wrong. You have a reservation and a valid gift certificate. You have every right to be here, and Ms. Chen will want to make this right." Elena nodded slowly. Thomas led her to a comfortable bench in the waiting area. He brought her a glass of ice water with lemon. "I'll be right nearby," he told her. "If you need anything at all, just let me know." The maitre d' watched this interaction from his podium. He looked nervous now. He had seen Thomas make a phone call and then treat this woman like an important guest. He had a sinking feeling that he had made a terrible mistake, but he was not sure exactly what would happen next. More customers came and went. The maitre d' seated them all with his professional smile, but his hands shook slightly as he handled the menus. He kept glancing at the door and at Elena sitting on the bench. He wondered who Thomas had called. Exactly 9 minutes after Thomas's phone call, a sleek black car pulled up outside the restaurant. 3 people got out. The woman in front was in her 50s with sharp, intelligent eyes and perfectly styled hair. She wore a gray business suit that looked both professional and expensive. Behind her were 2 other people, a man and a woman, both carrying tablets and folders. They looked like assistants or executives. The uniformed doorman hurried to open the door for them. "Good afternoon, Ms. Chen," he said, recognizing her immediately. Victoria Chen walked into Laurent's with quick, purposeful steps. Her eyes scanned the restaurant entrance. She saw Elena sitting on the bench, still holding her envelope. She saw Thomas standing nearby, and she saw the maitre d' at his podium, whose face had suddenly gone very pale. Victoria walked directly to Elena. Thomas stood up and Elena quickly followed, uncertain what was happening. "Mrs. Martinez?" Victoria said, extending her hand. "I'm Victoria Chen. I own this restaurant. I understand there has been a problem with your reservation." Elena shook her hand nervously. "I don't want to make trouble," she said again. "I just wanted to have dinner here. My husband bought me a gift certificate." "You are not making trouble," Victoria said firmly. "Someone else has made a very serious mistake and I am here to fix it. May I see your reservation confirmation and gift certificate?" Elena handed them over. Victoria examined them carefully, then handed them to one of her assistants. "Check these in our system," she ordered. The assistant immediately opened his tablet and began typing. Victoria then turned to the maître d'. He stood behind his podium, trying to look professional, but sweat was visible on his forehead. "What is your name?" Victoria asked him. Her voice was not loud, but it commanded attention. "Gerald, ma'am. Gerald Hopkins." "Gerald, can you explain to me why Mrs. Martinez's reservation was refused?" Victoria asked. "She has a confirmation number. She arrived on time. She has a valid gift certificate. Why is she not seated?" Gerald's mouth opened and closed. He looked like a fish out of water. We were fully booked, Ms. Chan. All tables were reserved." "Really?" Victoria raised an eyebrow. "Thomas, how many empty tables do we currently have?" Thomas had been ready for this question. "4 empty tables, Ms. Chen. 2 tables were walk-ins that you seated within the last 15 minutes. Victoria looked back at Gerald. "It seems we were not fully booked after all." The assistant with the tablet looked up. "Ms. Chen, I found the reservation. It was in the system until 12:43 today. It was manually deleted by user ID G. Hopkins at 12:44. Mrs. Martinez called the restaurant at 12:38 to confirm she was on her way." The silence that followed was heavy and uncomfortable. Gerald's face was now completely red. Several other staff members had gathered nearby, sensing that something important was happening. Customers at nearby tables were watching with interest. "So let me understand this correctly," Victoria said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Mrs. Martinez called to confirm her reservation. 6 minutes later, you deleted her reservation from the system. When she arrived, you told her we were fully booked. Then you seated other guests who didn't even have reservations. Is that accurate?" Gerald said nothing. There was nothing he could say. The evidence was clear. Victoria turned back to Elena. Her expression softened. "Mrs. Martinez, I apologize deeply for how you have been treated. This is not how we do business. This is not who we are. I would like to offer you the best table in our restaurant and a complete meal at no charge. We would be honored to have you as our guest." Elena looked at Victoria for a long moment. Then she asked a question that surprised everyone in the room. "Has this happened to other people?" Elena asked quietly. Victoria Chen stood very still. Elena's question hung in the air between them. It was a simple question, but it cut right to the heart of something much bigger than one canceled reservation. "What do you mean?" Victoria asked, though she suspected she already knew. Elena looked around at the elegant restaurant. She saw the wealthy customers in their expensive clothes. She saw the polished floors she had probably cleaned in other buildings just like this one. She saw the staff members watching nervously. "I mean," Elena said softly, "how many other people have come here with reservations and been turned away because they didn't look like they belonged? How many people who work hard, who save their money, who want one special meal have been judged by how they dress or what their hands look like?" Elena held up her own hands. They were worn and calloused from years of cleaning work. Her fingernails were short and clean, but no amount of lotion could completely hide the evidence of physical labor. "I've worked as a cleaner for 35 years, she continued. "I've scrubbed floors in offices where people make more money in a week than I make in a year. I've cleaned bathrooms in hotels where one night cost more than my monthly rent. And I've seen how some people look at me, like I'm invisible, like I don't matter." Her voice was not angry. It was sad and weary, but there was also strength in it. She was speaking a truth that everyone in the room knew existed but rarely talked about openly. "I didn't come here today expecting special treatment," Elena said. "I came here because my husband, before he died, wanted me to have one nice meal in one beautiful place. He saved money while he was sick to buy that gift certificate. He wanted me to feel special for one evening. That's all." Several of the staff members looked down at their feet. They knew Elena was right. They had seen Gerald turn away other people over the years, people who didn't meet his standards of what a Laurent's customer should look like. No one had said anything because Gerald had worked there for 5 years and seemed confident in his decisions. And honestly, no one wanted to risk their own job by making trouble. Victoria felt something hard and cold settle in her chest. She ran a large corporation with thousands of employees. She had always believed she ran ethical businesses. She had policies against discrimination. She had diversity training programs. But clearly something had failed. Policies on paper meant nothing if the people on the ground did not live them. "I don't know the answer to your question," Victoria said honestly, "but I'm going to find out." She turned to her 2 assistants. "I want a complete review of all reservation records for this location for the past year. Look for patterns of cancellations or refusals. Cross-reference with any customer complaints we've received. I also want similar reviews done at every property we own." The assistants nodded and began making notes on their tablets. Victoria turned to Gerald. "You're fired, effective immediately. Security will escort you out. You'll receive any pay owed to you, but you will never work at any Chen Hospitality property again." Gerald's face went from red to white. "Ms. Chen, please," he started to say. "I was just trying to maintain standards. The restaurant has an image to protect. The only image you protected was the image of discrimination and cruelty," Victoria said coldly. "Our standard is to treat every guest with respect. You failed that standard in the worst possible way. You made a judgment about someone based on her appearance. You violated our policies and our values. And worst of all, you hurt someone who deserved better." 2 security guards appeared as if from nowhere. They had been called by one of Victoria's assistants. Gerald was escorted out through the back entrance. Several staff members watched him go, their faces showing a mixture of emotions. Some looked satisfied. Others looked worried, perhaps wondering if their own actions would now be scrutinized. Thomas stepped forward. "Ms. Chen, if I may, Mrs. Martinez still hasn't had her meal. And if you're serious about finding out if this has happened before, there's something you should know." Victoria looked at him. "Go on." "I've been here 32 years, Thomas said. "I've worked under 3 different owners. You've been the owner for 8 years now. In that time, I've seen Gerald turn away at least a dozen people. Maybe more. Usually it was subtle. He'd tell them the reservation was lost in the system, or that there was a computer error, or that the table was needed for a large party. But it was always people who didn't look wealthy. Always people he decided didn't fit. Why didn't you report this before?" Victoria asked. Her tone was not accusatory, just genuinely curious. Thomas looked uncomfortable. "I should have. I know that now. But Gerald was the maître d'. He had authority. And I'm just a waiter. I worried that if I complained, I'd be the one who got fired, not him. I'm 62 years old, Ms. Chen. Finding another job at my age isn't easy. So I stayed quiet and hated myself for it. His honesty was painful but important." Victoria nodded slowly. "You did the right thing today, Thomas. And I want you to know that in my company, employees who speak up about discrimination are protected, not punished. I'm going to make sure everyone knows that." She turned back to Elena. "Mrs. Martinez, I still hope you'll allow us to serve you the meal you came here for. I meant what I said about the best table in the house. But I also want to ask you something else if you're willing." Elena waited, curious. "Would you come upstairs to my office after your meal?" Victoria asked. "I'd like to talk with you more. About what happened today. About your experiences, and about how we can make sure this never happens again at any of my restaurants." Elena hesitated. She was not used to being asked for her opinion by important people. She was used to being told what to do, where to clean, what schedule to follow. "Why do you want to talk to me?" Elena asked. "I'm nobody special." "That's where you're wrong," Victoria said firmly. "You're a customer who was treated terribly. You're a woman who has worked hard all her life. You're someone who asked a question that I should have been asking all along. That makes you exactly the person I need to talk to." Victoria personally escorted Elena to the best table in the restaurant. It was indeed by a large window with a beautiful view of the city. The afternoon sun streamed in, making the crystal and silver on the table sparkle. A small vase held fresh white roses. Thomas was assigned as Elena's server. He brought her a menu, but she found it overwhelming. So many dishes she had never heard of, prices that made her dizzy. Everything was written in fancy language that she didn't quite understand. Thomas saw her confusion and came to her rescue. "May I suggest the chef's special today?" he asked kindly. "It's a beautiful roasted chicken with herbs and vegetables, and it comes with a soup and salad. It's simple but delicious. That is, if you trust me." Elena smiled at him. It was her first real smile since entering the restaurant. "I trust you," she said. As Thomas walked away to place her order, Elena sat alone at the beautiful table. She looked out the window at the city below. People rushed along the sidewalks. Cars filled the streets. Everyone was busy with their own lives, their own worries, their own dreams. She thought about Roberto. How he would have loved to see her here. How proud he would have been that she didn't just walk away when she was turned away at the door. How he always told her she was stronger than she thought. The meal, when it came, was indeed beautiful. The chicken was tender and flavorful. The vegetables were perfectly cooked. The soup was rich and warming. Thomas checked on her several times, making sure she had everything she needed. Other staff members smiled at her genuinely. Word had spread about what happened, and everyone wanted to make up for Gerald's behavior. Elena ate slowly, savoring each bite. She tried to imagine Roberto sitting across from her, smiling his warm smile. She could almost hear his voice saying, "See? I told you that you were a queen." At other tables, customers ate and talked. Some of them glanced at Elena curiously. They had seen the commotion earlier. Some of them looked ashamed, as if they realized they had been complicit in a system that judged people by their appearance. Others seemed uncomfortable, not sure what to think about what had happened. One older woman at a nearby table caught Elena's eye and smiled. Then she did something unexpected. She raised her water glass in a small toast. Elena, surprised, raised her own glass in return. The woman nodded as if to say, "Good for you." After the meal, Thomas brought Elena a dessert she hadn't ordered. "Compliments of the chef," he said with a smile. It was a delicate chocolate cake with fresh berries. It was the most beautiful dessert Elena had ever seen. When she finished, Thomas presented her with something else. A small card. "Ms. Chen asked me to give you this. It's the key card to her office on the 10th floor. Take the elevator in the lobby. She's waiting for you." Elena took the card, suddenly nervous again. She was full of good food, and the afternoon had been overwhelming. Part of her just wanted to go home to her small apartment and process everything that had happened. But another part of her was curious. What did Victoria Chen really want to talk about? And maybe, just maybe, something good could come from this terrible experience. Elena rode the elevator to the 10th floor. The doors opened to a quiet hallway with thick carpet and expensive artwork on the walls. She found Victoria's office at the end of the hall. The door was open. Victoria took a sip of water and set down her glass carefully. She looked at Elena with an expression that was hard to read. It was not pity. It was something more like respect mixed with determination. "I want to start by asking you a question," Victoria said, "and I want you to be completely honest with me. Do you think what happened today was about one bad employee? Or do you think it's part of something bigger?" Elena considered the question carefully. She was not used to powerful people asking for her opinion. She was used to being told what to think, or more often not being asked to think at all. "I think," Elena began slowly, "that your employee Gerald believed he was doing his job. He believed he was protecting your restaurant. He thought that people like me, people who clean for a living and wear old coats, would make your other customers uncomfortable." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "So it's not just about one bad person. It's about a system where people like Gerald think it's okay to judge others based on how they look. And maybe it's about customers who expect only certain types of people to be in fancy places. And maybe it's about people like me who sometimes believe we don't belong in beautiful places." Victoria nodded slowly. "You're absolutely right. And that's why I wanted to talk to you. I can fire Gerald. That's easy. But firing one person doesn't fix the real problem. The real problem is deeper." She stood up and walked to her desk, picking up a tablet. "While you were eating, my team pulled reservation records for the past year. We found something disturbing. There are 17 documented cases of reservations being canceled at the last minute under Gerald's authority. In 12 of those cases, customers called to complain. In 8 cases, the customers mentioned that they felt discriminated against because of their appearance or economic status." Victoria's face was troubled. 17 times that we know of. But how many people didn't complain? How many just accepted it and left? How many decided that fancy restaurants weren't for people like them? "Probably a lot," Elena said quietly. "Most people don't complain. They don't think anyone will listen. Or they don't want to make trouble. Or they're embarrassed." "Exactly," Victoria said. She sat back down, leaning forward with her elbows on her knees. "Mrs. Martinez, can I ask you about your life, your work? I want to understand better." Elena was surprised by the question, but she answered. She told Victoria about growing up poor, about marrying Roberto when they were both 19. She talked about their 3 children, about working multiple jobs to make ends meet. She described her husband's illness and death, the grief that still felt fresh even after 3 years. She talked about her work as a cleaner, how she started at 5 in the morning in office buildings, scrubbing toilets and emptying trash before the executives arrived, how people walked past her without seeing her, as if she were part of the furniture, how some people were kind and said good morning, but many treated her like she was invisible. The hardest part, Elena said, is not the physical work. I'm strong. I can scrub floors and carry heavy trash bags. The hardest part is feeling like you don't matter, like your work is necessary but you as a person are not important. Victoria listened intently. As Elena spoke, something was nagging at the back of Victoria's mind. Something familiar about this conversation, about this woman. Mrs. Martinez, Victoria said slowly. Can I ask where you've worked over the years? What buildings or companies? Elena thought back. So many places. I've been cleaning for 35 years. Office buildings mostly. Some hotels. Let me think. I worked at the Grand Pacific Hotel for 3 years. That was a long time ago, maybe 25 years. I was part of the housekeeping staff there. Victoria's breath caught. The Grand Pacific Hotel, 25 years ago. What years exactly? Victoria asked, her voice suddenly intense. 1999 to 2002, Elena said, wondering why this mattered. Victoria stood up and walked to the window again. Her mind was racing backward through time. 25 years ago, she had been in her late 20s, working as an assistant manager in the accounting department of the Grand Pacific Hotel. It was one of the first properties owned by the Chen family, and Victoria had been working her way up in the company. 25 years ago, Victoria's mother had suffered a massive stroke. The medical bills had been overwhelming. Victoria's father had passed away 2 years earlier, so she was solely responsible. She had been working at the Grand Pacific while trying to visit her mother in the hospital every day. She had been exhausted, terrified, and nearly broke. The hospital bills kept growing. She couldn't afford both the medical expenses and her rent. She remembered crying in the women's restroom at the hotel one day. She had been so tired, so scared. She had felt completely alone. And then something amazing had happened. Someone had slipped an envelope under the door of the accounting office. Inside was cash, nearly $2,000 in small bills, and a note that said, "For your mother's care, from your friends in housekeeping." Victoria had asked around, trying to find out who had organized it, but no one would tell her. The housekeeping staff had closed ranks, protecting whoever had led the collection. All they would say was that they wanted to help, that they knew what it was like to worry about medical bills and family. That money had saved Victoria. It had paid for 2 months of her mother's medication and some of the hospital bills. It had given her breathing room to find a solution, and it had taught her something profound about dignity, kindness, and the value of every person. Regardless of their job title, Victoria turned back to face Elena. "Mrs. Martinez, did you work the day shift or night shift at the Grand Pacific?" "Day shift," Elena said. "I was the floor supervisor for housekeeping. Did you ever organize any collections among the housekeeping staff? For anyone who worked at the hotel?" Elena looked surprised. Then a memory seemed to surface. Sometimes, if someone was having trouble, if someone needed help, we housekeepers, we don't make much money, but we take care of each other. We understand hard times. Was there ever a collection for someone in the accounting department? Victoria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. For someone whose mother was in the hospital? Elena's eyes widened. She looked at Victoria carefully, really looked at her. There was a young woman, she said slowly. I never knew her name. She was always kind to us. She said good morning. She learned our names. Not many managers did that. Elena continued. One of the other housekeepers saw her crying in the bathroom. She heard her on the phone with the hospital, talking about bills she couldn't pay. So I talked to the other housekeepers. We all put in what we could. $5, $10, $20 if someone could spare it. We collected about $2,000. We left it at her office because we didn't want her to feel embarrassed. Victoria felt tears forming in her eyes. That was me, she said. That young woman was me. My mother was in the hospital. She'd had a stroke. I didn't know how I was going to pay the bills. And then that envelope appeared and it saved me. Both women stared at each other, the weight of this connection settling over them. You never knew? Elena asked. I tried to find out who organized it, Victoria said, but no one would tell me. They said it was from the whole housekeeping team. I wanted to thank someone to pay it back, but I never knew who to thank. You don't pay back something like that, Elena said simply. You pay it forward. You help the next person who needs it. Victoria sat down heavily in her chair. My mother recovered. She lived another 15 years. And that gift, that kindness from people who barely knew me, changed my whole perspective. It's why I've tried to run my business with certain values. It's why I have policies about treating employees well, about respecting everyone. She looked at Elena with new understanding, but today showed me that policies aren't enough. Having rules on paper doesn't mean anything if people don't live them. If managers like Gerald can turn away customers like you because they don't fit some narrow idea of who belongs where. Elena nodded. You can't just tell people to be respectful. You have to show them why it matters. You have to help them see that the woman in the old coat might be someone who saved someone's life with her kindness, or that the man with dirty work boots might be the person who keeps the city's water running. Everyone has value. Everyone has a story. Victoria made a decision in that moment. It was a decision that would change not just her restaurants, but her entire approach to business. Mrs. Martinez, I want to offer you a job, Victoria said. Elena looked startled. A job doing what? I want you to be a consultant for my company, Victoria explained. I want you to help me understand how service workers see and experience the world. I want you to help me create training programs that actually work. Programs that teach empathy, not just rules, she continued. You've worked in this industry for 35 years. You've seen how people treat workers. You understand dignity and respect in ways that someone like me, who has been in management for decades, might have forgotten. I need that perspective. Elena shook her head slowly. I'm not qualified for something like that. I didn't go to college. I don't have a degree. You have something better than a degree, Victoria said firmly. You have lived experience. You have wisdom. And you have the moral courage to stand up for yourself and ask hard questions. Those are exactly the qualifications I need. Helena was quiet for a long moment. She thought about Roberto, about what he would say if he were here. She thought about the years of hard work, of being invisible, of being judged, and she thought about the opportunity to maybe make things a little better for other people like her. I need to think about it, Elena said finally. This is all very sudden. This morning I was just trying to honor my husband's memory. Now you're offering me a job I never imagined having. Of course, Victoria said. Take all the time you need. But I want you to know that this offer is real, and it's important to me. Maybe it was fate that brought you to my restaurant today, or maybe it was Roberto looking out for you from wherever he is now. Elena felt tears come to her eyes at the mention of her husband's name. Victoria reached across and gently squeezed her hand. Whether you take the job or not, Victoria continued, I want you to know that what happened today is going to lead to real changes. I'm going to create new training programs at all my properties. I'm going to establish a complaint system where customers can report discrimination directly to corporate management, bypassing local managers who might ignore or hide problems. She picked up her tablet again. I'm also going to create an employee protection program. Any worker who reports discrimination or unethical behavior will be protected from retaliation. What Thomas said today, about being afraid to speak up because he might lose his job, that should never happen. Victoria stood and paced the room as she talked, her mind already working through the details. I'm going to require all management staff to spend at least 1 week per year working in entry-level positions. Cleaning rooms, washing dishes, serving tables. They need to remember what it feels like to be on the other side. Elena listened, impressed by Victoria's passion and commitment, but she also had a question. Ms. Chen, all of those things sound wonderful. But can I ask you something honestly? Of course. Please call me Victoria. Victoria, why are you doing all this? Elena asked. I mean, I'm glad you are. But you're a successful businesswoman. You own restaurants and hotels. You could have just apologized, given me a free meal, fired Gerald, and moved on. Why go to all this trouble? Victoria stopped pacing and looked directly at Elena. Do you really want to know? Yes, Victoria sat back down. When she spoke, her voice was softer, more vulnerable than it had been before. Because I almost forgot, she said. I almost forgot where I came from. I almost forgot what it felt like to be scared and struggling and at the mercy of people who had more power than me. She continued. My parents were immigrants. They came to this country with almost nothing. My father worked in a restaurant kitchen. My mother cleaned houses. They saved every penny to buy their first hotel. It was a small rundown place, but it was theirs. They taught me that every person deserves respect, regardless of their job or economic status. Victoria's eyes were distant, remembering. When they died, I inherited their small hotel business. Over the years, I grew it into what it is now. 20 hotels and restaurants. Millions of dollars in revenue. I thought I was honoring their legacy by building a successful business. But today, she said, looking at Elena, today I realized that I had failed their real legacy. My parents would have been ashamed of what happened to you. They would have been horrified that someone was turned away from one of my restaurants because of how they looked. She took a deep breath. You asked me why I'm doing all this. The truth is, I'm doing it because I need to, not just for you or for future customers, but for myself. I need to make sure that I never forget what really matters. Success isn't about money or properties or status. Success is about treating people with dignity and building something that makes the world a little bit better. Elena understood. She saw in Victoria a woman who, despite all her success, still carried the same fears and insecurities that everyone carried. The fear of losing yourself. The fear of becoming what you once resented. Your parents would be proud of you, Elena said quietly. Not because of the restaurants and hotels, but because you still have a good heart. Because you're willing to listen and learn and change. They sat together in comfortable silence for a few moments. Outside the window, the city continued its busy pace. The sun was starting to sink lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the buildings. Finally, Elena spoke again. Can I tell you about my children? Please, Victoria said. My oldest, Maria, is a teacher. Elena said with pride in her voice. She teaches 3rd grade in the same neighborhood where she grew up. She could have taken a job in a wealthy suburban school where she would make more money, but she wanted to teach kids like she was, kids whose parents work hard but don't have much. Elena continued. My middle child, Carlos, is a nurse. He works in the emergency room at County Hospital. He sees gang violence, drug overdoses, homeless people who have nowhere else to go. It's hard work and it breaks his heart sometimes. But he says someone has to care for people that society forgets about. And my youngest, Sophia, she's a social worker. She helps families stay together. She helps parents who are struggling with addiction or poverty keep their children. She fights the system every day to give people second chances. Elena's voice was filled with emotion. None of my children became rich. None of them have fancy titles or big houses. But Roberto and I were so proud of them because they chose to help people. They chose careers of service just like we did. We just served in different ways. That's a beautiful legacy, Victoria said. You and your husband raised 3 children who make the world better. That's real success. Roberto always said that we might be poor in money, but we were rich in what mattered, Elena said. He said that if we could teach our children to be kind, to work hard, and to stand up for what's right, then we had done our job as parents. She smiled, remembering. He also said that someday someone would recognize my worth. He said that I was too strong and too good to stay invisible forever. I never believed him. I thought he just loved me so much that he couldn't see me clearly. But maybe he was right. He was definitely right, Victoria said, and I think he would be very proud of you today. You didn't back down. You didn't accept unfair treatment. You stood your ground with dignity and grace, and you asked the question that needed to be asked. Elena thought about that. She had never seen herself as brave or strong. She was just a woman who cleaned buildings and tried to pay her bills. But maybe there was a different kind of strength in simply refusing to believe that you didn't matter. Maybe there was power in asking hard questions even when you were scared. I'll take the job, Elena said suddenly. Victoria looked up, surprised. Really? You don't need more time to think about it? I've thought about it, Elena said, and I realized something. For 35 years I've been invisible. I've cleaned buildings while people ignored me. I've worked hard while people looked through me. But maybe that means I saw things that other people didn't see. Maybe being invisible taught me to notice who else was invisible. She continued, if I can use that experience to help change things, even a little bit, then I should. For Roberto. For my children. For all the other housekeepers and janitors and service workers who deserve to be seen and respected. Victoria felt a surge of excitement and gratitude. Thank you, truly. You have no idea how much this means to me. I have one condition, Elena said. Name it. I keep my cleaning jobs, Elena said firmly. I'm not ready to give up that work. It's part of who I am. And besides, I need to stay connected to that world. If I'm going to help you understand service workers, I need to still be a service worker. Victoria nodded. That's fair. We can work around your schedule. And honestly, that makes you even more valuable as a consultant. You'll have current real-world experience, not just memories of what it used to be like. They discussed details for a while. Victoria explained that Elena would attend management training sessions and provide feedback. She would review policies and suggest changes. She would meet with other service workers at Victoria's properties and gather their perspectives. The work would be part-time and flexible, and the pay would be good. When do I start? Elena asked. How about next week? Victoria suggested. That will give my HR department time to process everything. And it will give you time to tell your family about this unexpected turn of events. Elena laughed. My children are going to think I'm making this up. They won't believe that their mother, who cleans toilets for a living, is now a consultant for a major hospitality company. Tell them to call me if they don't believe you, Victoria said with a smile. I'll confirm every word. As Elena prepared to leave, Victoria walked her to the door. Mrs. Martinez, before you go, I want to give you something. She opened a drawer in her desk and pulled out a small card. This is a VIP card for any of my properties. Hotels, restaurants, all of them. You and your family are welcome anytime. Meals, hotel stays, everything. It's not payment or a bribe. It's a thank you for the gift you gave me 25 years ago, even though you didn't know it was me. And for the gift you gave me today by agreeing to help make things better. Elena took the card, feeling its weight. This is too much, she protested. It's not enough, Victoria countered. It's never enough to truly thank someone who changed your life. But it's a start. Elena left Victoria's office feeling like she was in a dream. She rode the elevator back down to the lobby. She walked out through the restaurant, where Thomas smiled and waved to her. She stepped out onto the street where her day had started just a few hours ago. The city looked the same. The tall buildings, the rushing people, the expensive shops. But somehow everything felt different. Elena felt different. She felt seen. She felt valued. And most importantly, she felt hopeful that maybe, just maybe, things could change for people like her. 3 months had passed since that day at Laurent's. Elena stood in front of a room full of managers from all of Victoria's properties. She wore a simple but professional outfit that Victoria had helped her pick out. Her hands still showed the marks of her cleaning work, but now she held a presentation remote instead of a mop. She was nervous. These were educated people with college degrees and years of management experience. What could she possibly teach them that they didn't already know? But then she remembered Victoria's words. You're not here to teach them facts they can look up in a book. You're here to teach them something they can only learn from experience. Your experience. Elena clicked the remote and the first slide appeared on the screen behind her. It was a simple question in large letters. When was the last time you were invisible? The managers looked confused. Some whispered to each other. Elena let the silence sit for a moment before speaking. My name is Elena Martinez, she began. I am a housekeeper. I have been cleaning buildings for 35 years. I clean the offices where many of you work. I empty your trash, scrub your toilets, vacuum your floors, and most days you don't see me. She clicked to the next slide. It showed a photo of a janitor's cart in a hallway. This is my cart, Elena continued. Everything I need to do my job fits on this cart. Cleaning supplies, trash bags, gloves, simple tools for simple work. Or at least that's what many people think. They think my work is simple. They think I am simple. Another click. This slide showed a list of tasks. But let me tell you what I actually do, Elena said. I arrive at buildings before anyone else. I make sure everything is clean and ready before the important people start their important work. I notice when a pipe is leaking or a window is broken. I see who stays late at night stressed and tired. I find the family photos that fall behind desks. I see the tears in the bathroom, the angry phone calls in empty conference rooms, the birthday cards secretly passed between co-workers. The room was quiet now. The managers were paying attention. I see everything, Elena said simply. Because when you're invisible, you see the truth. You see how people really are, not how they pretend to be. She clicked again. The next slide showed 2 photos side by side. On one side, a woman in an expensive suit. On the other side, a woman in a cleaning uniform. 3 months ago, I went to Laurent's restaurant to use a gift certificate my late husband had bought for me. I was turned away because I didn't look like I belonged there. The maitre d' judged me based on my coat and my shoes. He decided I would make the other customers uncomfortable. He canceled my reservation and told me they were fully booked. Some of the managers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They had heard about the incident. Some of them had even been part of the aftermath, part of the investigations and policy reviews. But here's what I want you to understand, Elena said, her voice strong and clear. That maitre d' wasn't trying to be cruel. He genuinely believed he was protecting the restaurant. He believed that only certain types of people belonged in luxury establishments. He believed that people like me would lower the standards. She paused, letting that sink in. The question is, where did he learn to believe that? Did he wake up one day and decide to discriminate? Or did he learn slowly over time that some people matter more than others? That some people deserve respect and beautiful experiences, while others should stay in their place? Elena clicked to a new slide. It showed a quote. Excellence is not about who you serve. It's about how you serve everyone. Victoria Chen offered me a job after what happened, Elena continued. She asked me to help change the culture at her properties. At first I didn't think I was qualified. I'm just a housekeeper. What do I know about running a business? She smiled slightly. But then I realized something. I know what it feels like to be judged unfairly. I know what it feels like to be invisible. And I know what it feels like when someone finally sees you and treats you with respect. That knowledge is valuable, maybe more valuable than any business degree. Over the next hour, Elena shared her experiences. She told stories about being ignored, dismissed, and disrespected. But she also told stories about the small kindnesses that meant everything. The manager who learned her name. The executive who said thank you. The colleague who asked how her children were doing. Respect costs nothing, Elena said. It doesn't lower your standards to treat everyone with dignity. If anything, it raises your standards. Because true excellence includes everyone. She ended her presentation with a challenge. For the next week, I want you to notice the service workers around you. The cleaners, the dishwashers, the maintenance staff. Learn their names. Say good morning. Ask them how their day is going. And really listen to their answer. You might be surprised, she concluded. You might discover that the woman who cleans your office is actually the woman who once saved your life with her kindness. You never know who people really are until you see them. The managers gave her a standing ovation. Many of them came up afterward to thank her and shake her hand. Some shared their own stories of being judged or dismissed. Others admitted that they had been guilty of treating service workers as invisible and promised to do better. Victoria, watching from the back of the room, felt proud and emotional. Elena had been a natural. She had spoken from the heart in a way that no corporate trainer ever could. Over the following months, Elena became a regular presence at Victoria's properties. She visited hotels and restaurants, talking with staff and observing operations. She made recommendations, some small and some large, about how to create a more respectful workplace culture. One of her first suggestions was simple but powerful. Every property now displayed photos of all staff members in the employee areas, with their names and a brief description of their role. The photos were professional and dignified, treating the housekeepers and dishwashers with the same respect as the managers and chefs. She also suggested changing the way managers interacted with staff. Instead of just giving orders, managers were now required to spend time working alongside entry-level employees at least once a month. The hotel manager who worked a shift cleaning rooms, the restaurant manager who washed dishes. It created empathy and understanding. But perhaps Elena's most important contribution was the creation of the Martinez Fund. Victoria had insisted on naming it after Elena and her late husband. The fund provided scholarships for the children of service workers. It helped kids whose parents worked in hotels, restaurants, and cleaning services to go to college. The first year, the fund helped 35 students, young people who might not have been able to afford higher education. Young people whose parents, like Elena, worked hard but struggled to make ends meet. At the scholarship ceremony, Elena met the students and their parents. She saw herself in many of the parents. Worn hands, tired eyes, but incredible pride in their children. She saw Roberto in their faces too. The determination to give their kids a better life. One mother, a housekeeper like Elena, hugged her tightly. "Thank you," the woman whispered. "My daughter is the first person in our family to go to college. Because of you, because of this fund, her dreams can come true." Elena hugged her back, tears streaming down her face. "Thank your daughter for working hard," Elena said. "And thank yourself for raising someone with dreams. That's the real achievement." Elena's own children were amazed by their mother's transformation. Not that she had changed who she was, but that the world was finally recognizing what they had always known, that their mother was wise, strong, and valuable. Maria, the teacher, used her mother's story in her classroom. She taught her third graders that everyone deserves respect, no matter what job they do. She invited Elena to speak to her class, and the children were fascinated by her stories. Carlos, the nurse, told his colleagues about his mother's work with the Chan Hospitality Group. It sparked conversations in the hospital about how they treated their own service workers, the people who cleaned the hospital rooms and delivered the meals. Sophia, the social worker, saw her mother's experience as proof that change was possible, that one person standing up for themselves could create ripples that spread far and wide. Every year on her anniversary, Elena returned to Laurence. Thomas always served her personally, and they had become good friends. They would talk about the changes they had seen, the small victories and the ongoing challenges. The restaurant had become a different place. The new maitre d', a woman named Sarah, greeted every customer with genuine warmth regardless of how they looked. She had been trained by Elena personally, and understood that every person who walked through the door deserved respect. On what would have been her 41st anniversary with Roberto, Elena sat at the same table by the window. She ordered the same roasted chicken that Thomas had recommended on that first difficult day, and she talked quietly to Roberto, though he was not there to hear her. "You were right, my love," she said softly. "You always said I was strong. You said someone would see my worth someday. I didn't believe you then. But you knew me better than I knew myself." She looked out the window at the city below. So much had changed, and yet so much stayed the same. There were still people struggling, still people being treated unfairly, still people fighting to be seen. But there were also small victories. Managers who learned to see their employees as people, not just workers. Companies that created programs to support their staff. Young people whose lives were changed by scholarships. And somewhere in offices and hotels across the city, housekeepers and janitors who felt a little more valued, a little more seen. Victoria joined Elena at her table, as she did every year. They had become genuine friends over the years. Their partnership had created real change, not just at Victoria's properties but throughout the hospitality industry. Other companies had noticed and started implementing similar programs. "I have something for you," Victoria said, placing a small box on the table. Elena opened it. Inside was a beautiful pin, designed to look like Elena's cleaning cart but made of silver and small gemstones. It was elegant and meaningful. "It's the award for the new Service Excellence program we're launching," Victoria explained. "Every employee who demonstrates exceptional respect and kindness to their colleagues will receive one. It's called the Martinez Award for Dignity and Service." Elena held the pin carefully. "Roberto would have loved this," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "He always said that service was noble work, that helping others in any way was important." "He was right," Victoria said, "and you've proven it. You've shown that a housekeeper can change a company, that a woman in an old coat can spark a revolution, that everyone has power, even if the world tries to tell them they don't." Elena smiled through her tears. She thought about that day 3 months ago when she had been turned away at the door. How hurt and small she had felt. How she had almost just walked away, but she hadn't walked away. She had stood her ground. She had asked hard questions. She had refused to accept that she didn't matter. And that choice, that moment of quiet courage had changed everything. That evening, as Elena rode the bus home to her small apartment, she felt Roberto's presence strongly. She could almost hear his voice saying, "See? I told you that you were a queen." She laughed softly to herself, earning a curious look from the passenger next to her. But she didn't care. She was thinking about all the people whose lives had been touched by what happened. The students who would go to college, the workers who felt more respected, the managers who learned to see beyond appearances. One woman, one moment, one simple act of standing up for herself. That's all it took to start a wave of change. Elena still cleaned buildings. She still scrubbed floors and emptied trash. But now she did it knowing that her work had value, that she had value, that everyone had value. And every time she saw her reflection in the polished floor she had just cleaned, she stood a little taller. Not because she had become someone different, but because the world had finally recognized who she had always been. A woman of dignity. A woman of strength. A woman whose simple act of courage had revealed a power that had been there all along, just waiting to be seen.